Welcome to HFY Beyond Terra, where humanity doesn't just survive, it becomes the galaxy's biggest surprise. Subscribe, and let's go beyond Terra.
They stored the war hammer the way you stored storms. Behind a pressure-sealed vault door on a dais of black basalt, beneath 3 rings of blue-white ward lights, it rested with the patience of a mountain. The haft was dark metal wrapped in braided leather the color of dried blood. The head was a blunt, square block, its edges chamfered like an engineer's apology to physics. Etched into its faces were old runes that looked less like writing and more like scars. Kithra of House Varin stood alone before it, hands clasped behind her back, breathing slow to keep the tremor out of her shoulders. She had been champion of the Sable Arena for 6 cycles. She had broken a rival's shield wall with a single charge. She had walked through a blizzard on the ice step with a spear shaft through her thigh and refused sedation because pain is information. Her people, Threxians, loved strength the way other civilizations loved art, and the war hammer was their purest hymn. It was called Vowbreaker because the last time it had been raised in war, it broke the oath of an empire. Now it waited for her to fail it again. Kithra stepped closer. The wards hummed faintly, reacting to her proximity. She reached out, fingers hovering above the grip without touching. A voice behind her said, "So that's it." Kithra didn't startle. She'd heard the human's quiet footfalls in the corridor long before he reached the vault. She also hadn't given him permission to speak. "You are not cleared for this chamber," she said, not turning. "I'm your liaison," the human replied. "Or I was told I'm your liaison," they said. "Find champion Kithra, don't get in her way, and try not to die. I'm batting 1,000 so far." His accent clipped words in a way that made them sound sharper than they were. His name, according to the dossier, was Noah Rook, a mechanical systems specialist from the Human Diplomatic Corps, assigned after the treaty that turned an armistice into a marriage of convenience. Kithra let her gaze drift over her shoulder. He was smaller than her, even with his boots, narrower through the shoulders, leaner in the torso, no ceremonial scars, no clan sigils. He wore a plain, dark uniform with reinforced seams as if he expected the universe to grab at him. Most telling of all, he looked at the hammer without reverence. "You are in my way," Kithra said. Rook nodded once as if he'd been expecting that. "Got it." He made to step back, then paused, eyes narrowing slightly at the ward lights. "You've tried to lift it," he said. Kithra's jaw tightened. "All champions must, and you couldn't." Her hand moved to the hilt of her side blade before she could stop it. "Do you enjoy bleeding, human?" Rook lifted both hands, palms open. "Not particularly. But I'm good at noticing patterns. Your shoulder's taped. Your left forearm has bruising shaped like a grip. You've been here alone repeatedly. This isn't a tourist stop." Kithra turned fully to face him, letting her height and armor do their old work. "The hammer is bound to my house. The rights are not your concern." "If it's bound," Rook said carefully, "why do you keep trying?" The question landed more cleanly than an insult would have. Because the hammer wasn't just bound to House Varin. It was bound to the story of her grandmother, who had lifted it in her youth and carried it into the siege of Aster Gate. Bound to her mother, who had lifted it with both hands and cried afterward from the strain, then smiled and lied that she hadn't. Bound to the expectation that Kithra would be the next in line, the one who would raise Vowbreaker and prove that her bloodline still had meaning. Because if she couldn't lift it, then all her victories were. Lesser decorations pinned on a uniform that didn't fit. Kithra didn't answer. Rook's gaze shifted between Kithra and the hammer. "Is it cursed?" "It is heavy," Kithra said, and hated how small that sounded. Rook's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Heavy I can work with." Kithra stepped in front of him, blocking the dais. "You will not approach." The human looked up at her, then at the wards again. "Do the lights shock me if I get close? They will lock your muscles and drop you where you stand." "Okay," Rook said, "so they're keyed to your biometrics." Kithra's nostrils flared. "Stop thinking out loud." He nodded, then did the opposite. "If they're keyed to you, could you just invite me in temporarily for curiosity's sake?" Kithra's hand tightened on her blade. "Curiosity killed more than cats, human." "It also built most of our starships," Rook said, unbothered. "Look, I'm not trying to disrespect your tradition. But I've been on your station for 9 days, and I've watched 12 Threxian security officers fail to move a cargo strut because they insisted on lifting it the way their training taught them. They had the strength. They just didn't have the leverage." Kithra stared. "You think my failure is technique?" "I think it's possible," he said. "And I think you wouldn't be here alone if you didn't want an answer that wasn't just 'you're not worthy.'" Kithra felt something hot and unwelcome rise in her throat. She could banish him with a single command. She could call guards, let the wards drop him, and teach him respect through pain. But she was tired of the hammer, tired of the whispers, tired of sleeping with her hands clenched as if still gripping an impossible weight. Kithra exhaled once slow. "2 steps," she said. "No more, and if you touch the hammer, I will remove your arm." Rook's nod was crisp. "Fair." Kithra extended her hand toward the ward console, a slab of matte crystal embedded in the wall. She pressed her palm against it. The lights shifted from blue to amber. The hum softened as if the chamber were taking a careful breath. 2 steps, she repeated. Rook stepped forward exactly 2. He stopped at the edge of the dais, eyes studying the hammer with a technician's focus. Up close, Vowbreaker was worse. The head was dense alloy laced with gravitic anchors, ancient tech that made it heavier in the hands of those who tried to swing it without discipline. It was an artifact weapon designed to punish arrogance. Kithra had known this intellectually. Her body still didn't forgive it. Rook crouched slightly, not touching. How heavy is it? It does not have a number, Kithra said. It has a truth. Okay, Rook said. What's the truth? Kithra's lips pulled back from her teeth. That I am not my grandmother. Rook's expression shifted, something like sympathy quickly masked. He rose and rolled his shoulders once, a small motion that looked like loosening tension. You mind if I try something? He asked. Kithra's laugh was a short, humorless bark. You with that frame? I'll take that as a yes, he said, and before she could protest, he stepped closer. Kithra's hand snapped out, catching his wrist. He stopped instantly. Kithra stared at his skin, soft, unscarred, warm. Her grip could break bone. She let him feel that for a heartbeat. You do not understand, she hissed. No male could lift it, not even the High Warlord. The hammer does not permit it. Rook met her eyes. Then it'll teach me something. Kithra's jaw clenched so hard it ached. She released him, not because she agreed, but because she couldn't find a reason that wasn't fear. Rook approached the hammer like it might move on its own. He put his feet shoulder-width apart, then changed his mind. He adjusted them slightly, angling his stance. He squatted, keeping his back straight, and reached for the haft, not with both hands, with one. Kithra felt her heartbeat punch. His fingers wrapped around the leather, testing the grip. He didn't pull immediately. He settled his palm like a craftsman aligning a tool. Then he inhaled and lifted. There was no dramatic roar, no muscle corded like cables, no heroic trembling. The hammer rose off the basalt with a smooth, controlled motion, as if the laws of the chamber had simply decided to be kinder. Vowbreaker's head cleared the dais by a handspan, hanging from Rook's one-handed grip. The ward lights flickered in confusion, amber wavering to blue and back again. The hum spiked, then steadied. Kithra couldn't move. Rook held the hammer as if it were heavy, because it was, but not impossible. His wrist tightened, forearm flexing. He adjusted his elbow under the line of weight. He didn't fight it, he supported it. He looked up at her, breath measured. It's not light. Kithra's throat made a sound that wasn't language. Rook's eyes flicked down to the hammer, then back to her. But it's not magic, it's physics plus some clever tech. He lowered it carefully, letting it settle without a clang. The dais did not crack. The universe did not end. The hammer simply returned to waiting. Kithra stood frozen for 3 long heartbeats before her body remembered it could function. What are you? She demanded. Rook flexed his hand once, shaking out the tension. Human. No, Kithra snapped. Answer properly. He hesitated, then spoke with more care. I used to work salvage, ship hulks, collapse trusses. You learn fast that the question is, can I lift it? It's can I move it safely? Kithra stepped closer, armor whispering. You lifted it, one-handed. He nodded. Momentarily, with the center of mass close and my elbow under the load. Tried to swing it like a club, it would rip my shoulder out. Kithra stared at the hammer as if it had betrayed her. Rook looked at her bruised forearm, then at her shoulder tape. How do you try? Kithra's pride wanted to lie. Her exhaustion made honesty easier. I seize it, she said, voice tight. I command it to rise, I pull. Rook nodded slowly. So you're treating it like a challenge, not a tool. It is a challenge. Sure, he said, but the hammer doesn't care about pride, it cares about vectors. Kithra did not know the word, but she understood the tone. You've been fighting the wrong enemy. Her hands curled into fists. Do not teach me in my own vault, human. Rook's gaze stayed steady. I'm not trying to teach you, I'm trying to keep you from tearing your shoulder apart. Kithra's vision narrowed. You humiliate me. He looked startled. That wasn't. You lifted what I could not, she said, voice rising. In the place of my house, before my eyes. With no right, no prayer, no. He took a small step back, palms open again. Kithra, I didn't know it would land like that. The use of her name, unadorned, should have earned him pain. Instead, it cracked something in her chest. Kithra's breathing grew rough. She turned away abruptly, staring down at the basalt floor so he wouldn't see the heat in her eyes. Outside the vault, the station's announcement system chimed once, routine, indifferent. Then the general alarm blared. Red light washed into the chamber like blood. A flat, urgent voice echoed through the corridor speakers. Hull breach, Deck 12. Containment failure in the auxiliary grav ring. All personnel evacuate. Kithra's head snapped up. Deck 12 was the engineering spine. If the auxiliary grav ring failed, half the station would lose stabilization. The docking arms would shear. The treaty delegates, human and Threxian, were on board. Rook's face went pale. That's my section, he said. Kithra didn't hesitate. She grabbed her helmet and slammed it onto her head. Move! They sprinted. As they pounded through corridors, Kithra's mind flashed through tactical maps. The auxiliary grav ring anchored the station's rotational balance. A containment failure could mean a gravitic surge, mass increasing and decreasing unpredictably like a heartbeat-turned weapon. They reached Deck 12 to find chaos. A bulkhead had peeled open like a tin lid. Beyond it, the maintenance bay shimmered air filled with glittering particles, ionized debris. The gravity inside was wrong. Tools floated, then slammed into the floor, then floated again, as if the bay could not decide how heavy it wanted to be. Threxian engineers clustered at the threshold, snarling orders at each other. A massive support strut, part of the ring's stabilizer assembly, had shifted out of alignment. To reset the ring, they needed the strut seated into its socket. But the grav surge made it unpredictably heavy. Kithra saw the High Warlord's adjutant among them face grim. He pointed at the strut. "We must brace and lift together, 10 of you, now." 10 Threxians stepped forward, armor locking, hands gripping the strut's ribbed surface. They heaved. For half a second, the strut rose. Then the bay pulsed. Gravity spiked. The strut dropped with brutal force, pinning 2 engineers' hands. One screamed, voice muffled by helmet. The adjutant cursed. Again. Pushed forward beside Kithra, eyes scanning, mind moving with terrifying speed. "Stop," he said, loud enough to cut through the noise. The adjutant turned, fury blazing. "Human, back away!" Kithra stepped between them, her authority like a drawn blade. "He speaks." The adjutant's eyes widened. He did not like it, but he obeyed. Rook gestured at the strut, then at the socket. "You're lifting dead weight in a variable gravity field. You need to slide it, not lift it. You need a pivot." The adjutant snarled. "We have no time for human games." Rook pointed at a stack of maintenance rollers, cylindrical supports used to move heavy equipment. "Rollers, chain, a lever arm, anchor on that beam." Kithra understood enough to see it. Reduce friction, control movement, keep hands out of crush zones. Simple, brutally effective. She barked orders in Threxian. Engineers snapped to attention. Rollers were shoved into place. Chains were looped. A beam was braced as a fulcrum. Rook moved like he'd rehearsed in nightmares. He tied knots quickly, checked angles, then stepped back. "On my count," he said. "Do not fight the gravity. Time it. When it lightens, move. When it spikes, lock." The bay pulsed again, tools lifted. "Now," Rook shouted. They pushed. The strut slid a fraction. Rollers turned. The engineers' boots squealed on the deck plating. Gravity spiked. The strut tried to slam down. But the chains caught, the lever held, and the engineers locked their stance instead of sacrificing their hands. Rook's eyes tracked the shimmer. "Now!" Another push, another slide. Kithra found herself beside him, bracing the lever arm with her shoulder, feeling the surge through her bones. This was not arena combat. This was wrestling with a machine that didn't care who won. The strut neared the socket. A warning tone shrieked, the ring's harmonic frequency rising toward failure. Rook's jaw tightened. "One more surge and we're out of tolerance." Kithra's hands clenched. She could see the socket so close. The bay pulsed lightning. "Now!" Rook roared. They shoved with everything they had. The strut slid into the socket with a deep, satisfying thunk. For a heartbeat, the bay hung in weightless silence. Then the gravity stabilized. The alarms shifted from a scream to a steady, lower tone, signaling containment regained. Air scrubbers hissed. The glittering debris settled. Engineers exhaled as one. Kithra turned her helmeted gaze toward Rook. He was breathing hard, sweat beading along his hairline. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline draining away. The adjutant stepped forward, pride bruised but alive. "You prevented disaster." Rook nodded once, too exhausted for ceremony. "We did." The adjutant's eyes slid to Kithra. "Champion, the human gives orders and you enforce them." Kithra's voice was low, because his orders were correct. The adjutant looked as if he had bitten metal. He turned away, barking commands to secure the bay. Rook leaned against the wall, wiping his palm on his uniform. He glanced at Kithra, hesitated. "About before," Kithra held up a hand, not a command, a pause. She stared at him for a long moment, letting the station's cooling systems and distant alarms fill the space. Then she said, "You lifted Vowbreaker." He nodded cautiously. "And you did not swing it." "No," he said. "I respected what it would do to me if I got stupid." Kithra's eyes narrowed. "You called it physics." "Mostly," he admitted. "Plus whatever gravitic anchors your ancestors built in, it resists people who treat it like a toy." Kithra's throat tightened again, but this time it was not humiliation. It was the sharp edge of revelation. "You think it punishes arrogance," she said. "I think it punishes bad handling," Rook corrected gently, "which often comes packaged with arrogance." Kithra looked down at her own hands, scarred, strong, accustomed to forcing the world to yield. In the arena, force was virtue. Here, force without control was failure. She turned back toward him. "If you can lift it," she said, "then the stories are wrong." Rook shook his head. "Maybe the stories are incomplete." Kithra's jaw worked. "My people will call it shame. They will say my hammer chose a male outsider over its rightful bearer." Rook's eyes softened. Then don't let them frame it that way, Keithra stared. He took a slow breath. By making it clear the hammer didn't choose me, it responded to how I approached it. That means you can approach it differently too. Keithra's pride flared. You presume I cannot learn what a thin-bodied human knows. I presume you can, he said, steady. But you've been taught that struggle equals honor. Sometimes honor is admitting the first method isn't working. Keithra wanted to argue. Instead, she remembered the engineer's hands pinned under the strut. The way the gravity spiked and punished brute effort. She remembered how Valbreaker rose when Rook moved with discipline. A strange, unfamiliar calm settled into her chest. Return with me, she said. Rook blinked. To the vault. Yes, his mouth opened, then closed. Now, she repeated, voice iron. They walked back through cooling corridors while the station recovered. Word traveled faster than footsteps. By the time they reached the vault, an honor guard waited outside, 4 Threxians in full ceremonial armor, and behind them the adjutant again, lips pressed thin. Champion, the adjutant said, formal. The High Warlord requests explanation for the human's conduct. Keithra stepped forward. The human prevented catastrophe on Deck 12. That is known, the adjutant said. Also known is that the human lifted Valbreaker. Keithra's spine straightened. He did, murmurs rippled through the guards. The adjutant's gaze sharpened. Such an act is unacceptable. Keithra's voice dropped into the tone that ended arguments in the arena. Unacceptable is losing the station because tradition refused leverage. Unacceptable is letting pride kill engineers. Unacceptable is misunderstanding what strength truly is. The adjutant stiffened. You speak dangerously. I speak accurately, Keithra said. She pressed her palm to the vault console. The ward lights shifted to amber again, humming softly. The door opened with a hiss. Keithra stepped inside first. The hammer waited. She turned to Rook. Lift it again. His eyes widened. Keithra, this is going to escalate. Lift it, she repeated, and there was no room for debate. Rook stepped forward, careful, the same stance, the same alignment. He reached one hand and lifted Valbreaker a handspan off the dais. The guards gasped behind them. The adjutant made a sound like a growl. Keithra raised her voice so all could hear. Observe. She moved to stand beside Rook, close enough to feel the hammer's presence in the air. She pointed at his elbow position, his wrist alignment, the way the head stayed close to his body. He does not wrestle it, she said. He does not challenge it to prove his worth. He respects its weight and obeys its truth. Rook lowered the hammer carefully. Keithra stepped forward. This hammer was forged to break oaths. It breaks those who approach it with lies. The lie is that strength is only force. She placed her hand on the haft. A murmur rose. She could feel eyes drilling into her back. Keithra adjusted her stance, mirroring Rook's. Not perfectly, her body was different, but she found the same principle. Bring the center close, stack joints, make the skeleton do what muscle could not sustain. She inhaled. She did not pull. She set her grip. She aligned. Then she lifted. The hammer did not leap. It did not yield easily. It rose grudgingly, heavy as a vow, but it rose. A hand spun off the basalt, hanging from her grasp, trembling slightly with the honest strain of it. The ward lights flickered, amber to blue to amber, as if the chamber itself reevaluated its assumptions. Keithra held it for 2 seconds, then 3. Her shoulder screamed. Her forearm burned, but it was pain with purpose, not pain of failure. She lowered Valbreaker with care, setting it down as if placing a sleeping beast back into its den. Silence followed, thick, stunned, reverent. Keithra turned to the guards. Tell the High Warlord, she said, that the hammer remains with House Varin. Also tell him that humans are not weak, they are different. The adjutant's eyes were wide, not with anger now, but with reluctant awe. Champion, you lifted it. Keithra's voice was quiet. I did, he swallowed. Then what is the human's place in this? Keithra looked at Rook, who stood slightly behind her, hands still flexing as if remembering the weight. He met her gaze without triumph, without claim. He did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a person who had carried heavy things and learned not to boast about it. Keithra faced the guards again. His place, she said, is what we decide it to be, not as a thief of our symbols, not as a mockery of our rights, but as proof that strength can take forms we do not expect. She paused, then added, sharp enough to cut. And if any among you believe tradition is weakened by learning, you may challenge me in the arena and discover how wrong you are. No one moved. The guard captain thumped a fist to his chest in salute. Others followed, the sound like a drumbeat. When the vault door finally sealed again and the ward lights returned to calm blue, Keithra remained inside with Rook. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Rook exhaled. That was intense. Keithra's gaze remained on the hammer. It will become more intense. Yeah, he said softly. I figured. Keithra turned to him. Why did you lift it one-handed? Rook blinked. Because you told me not to get in your way. If I used 2 hands, you'd think I was competing. One hand was a demonstration, not a duel. Keithra studied him, searching for arrogance and finding only caution. You are careful with pride, she said. I've seen pride get people crushed, Rook replied. Keithra thought of pinned hands, of gravity spikes. Of the old lie, that struggle alone made someone worthy. She stepped closer to him, close enough that her shadow covered his boots. "You humiliated me," she said again, but her voice was different now, less accusation, more truth. Rook's shoulders tensed. "I'm sorry." Kithra watched his face. The apology was real, no performance. "You also gave me a path," she said. Rook looked up. "So we're okay?" Kithra considered the question as if it were tactical. Then she extended her hand, not for dominance, but for agreement. "In my people's terms," she said, "you have shared burden. That earns respect." Rook hesitated, then took her hand. His grip was firm, not trying to prove anything. Kithra released him and looked back at Vowbreaker. "This hammer," she said, "was meant to break oaths." Rook nodded. Kithra's voice hardened into vow. "Then we will use it to break the oldest oath of all, the oath that says strength belongs to one bloodline, one sex, one people. Strength belongs to those who carry it without lying." Rook swallowed. "That's a pretty big cultural renovation." Kithra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I am a champion. I do not renovate gently." Rook let out a breath that might have been a laugh if he trusted it. "Then I'll try to keep up." Kithra opened the vault console again and touched the ward settings, lowering the safety lock by a fraction. "Return tomorrow," she ordered. "We will lift again." Rook stared. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," Kithra said, "and the next day until my body learns the truth instead of the story." Rook nodded slowly. "All right. But we're doing warm-ups, and I'm taping your shoulder properly, and if you try to muscle it like a personal insult, I'm walking out." Kithra's eyes narrowed. "You give commands." "I give survival advice," he corrected. Kithra stepped toward the door. "Then advise well." As she left the chamber, she heard the faint hum of Vowbreaker behind her, patient and heavy and honest. The station lights outside were steady now. The alarms were quiet. Somewhere, diplomats would argue over what today meant. Warriors would mutter. Elders would consult old texts. Let them. Kithra had lifted the hammer, not because she was her grandmother, but because she was herself, and because a human had dared to treat a sacred weight as a problem to solve rather than a pride to conquer. For the first time in many cycles, the future did not feel like an impossible burden. It felt like something she could move, one careful lift at a time.